Muchas gracias. Muy buenas tardes con todas y todos. Una vez más, me presento. Soy Víctor Chocho y soy parte del Ministerio de Ambiente, Agua y Transición Ecológica de Ecuador. Antes de poder iniciar nuestra jornada del día de hoy, quisiéramos dar algunos pequeños anuncios. Primero, para los participantes que no hayan podido asistir a las charlas anteriores, esto ya se encuentra disponibles en el canal de YouTube de Spinach. Los colegas del staff estarán colocando los enlaces en el chat para que puedan, acceder al canal de YouTube y puedan ver las dos charlas anteriores. Igual la charla del día de hoy también, una vez que se termine, será editado el video y se quedará también colgado en el canal de YouTube de Spinach. Así también durante el transcurso de la charla se estará colocando un enlace de Google Forms en el chat, por favor, para que nos ayuden con su registro. Así también solicitamos que por favor revisen la configuración de sus equipos, ya de que para que no haya interrupciones, manteniendo siempre sus micrófonos apagados. Como pudieron ver en el programa del evento, tendremos una pausa a la mitad del mismo, prácticamente dentro de una hora aproximadamente. Las preguntas y comentarios pueden escribirlas en el chat. Nosotros estaremos tomando nota de ellas, o también habrá una plenaria al final de la charla el día de hoy para que puedan también hacer sus preguntas y comentarios. Las preguntas serán al final de las dos charlas, luego del receso, no durante cada charla. Es así que de parte del equipo del proyecto CESP, promoviendo la visibilidad de las colecciones científicas de América Latina y el Caribe, fortaleciendo su presencia en GRSciColl, queremos darle la más cordial bienvenida a este tercer seminario de la serie Colecciones de Ciencias Naturales de América Latina y el Caribe, activas, visibles y bien conectadas. Este tercer seminario web lleva por nombre el Registro de Colecciones Científicas de GBIF-CESP como potente columna vertebral. Para nuestra primera charla el día de hoy, titulada Introducción al Registro Mundial de Colecciones Científicas GRSciColl, quiero darle la bienvenida a Mari Grosjean. Ella es parte del equipo de GBIF. Ella es parte del equipo que lleva el tema de GRSciColl. No sé, Mari, si puedes, por favor, compartir pantalla. ¿Sí me escuchas bien, no, Mari? Estás muteada, Mari.
Yeah, thank you, Victor, because I couldn't unmute myself. I was about to write on the chat. Yeah, thank you for allowing me to unmute. So I understand that this is my turn to present now. And sí. I will, thank you. And I'll share my screen. Okay. Hola a todos, me llamo Marie. Trabajo en el infraestructura mundial de información a la biodiversidad. Voy a presentarles el registro global de colecciones científicas, but in English, because that's all I can say in Spanish. Okay, so we call this Global Registry of Scientific Collection GRSciColl for short, and GRSciColl is a community-created clearinghouse of collection information. It contains information about physical scientific collections, so what they contain, where they're located, who can answer questions about them, as well as their associated institutions and associated staff member. And they cover institutions and collections across almost 200 countries. So it's a pretty okay coverage, although it's not necessarily all the countries that are represented the same. The GRSciColl is also a repository of codes and identifiers. Here you have some numbers. And these codes and identifiers, well, the identifiers might be unique, but the codes aren't. But that being said, it's the closest thing we have to a reference to those codes and identifiers. And I'll get to that in a little bit more. And all this information is accessible via a website, so gbif.org/scientific-collections, which you can see a little screenshot here on the side, and also via our API, which is documented at the address below. So let me just, So who is GRSciColl for? GRSciColl is for everyone interested in physical scientific collections. The information is easily accessible, but it's also for institutions to be able to present their work and their collection and to make them discoverable and findable. National organizations such as GBIF nodes can use the information available on GRSciColl to identify priorities areas to encourage data mobilization. So meaning, for example, sharing digitized specimen on GBIF. And finally, other systems can use GRSciColl and specifically, for example, the GRSciColl API to be able to have references for the various collection codes and identifiers that might be used in the literature, for example. So I mentioned the information on GRSciColl is created by the community. And the way it works is that anyone can make suggestions of modification via our editing interface. So this is how it looks like. Anyone can log in. Well, actually, you don't even have to log in. Anyone can go on the website and click the suggestion button.
Mari, sorry interrupt you.
And that can include updating the core information.
Mari,
can include adding a missing collection or institution, merging potential duplicates, or transforming an institution into a collection, for example. All the suggestions will be then reviewed by either a member of the GBIF Secretariat or a person who has a particular permission to review those, then will be applied or discarded if this is not relevant. So outside of anyone being able to make suggestions to the GRSciColl, we also have editors and mediators. So those are people who we gave permission, specific permission in the registry to do a number of things. So here you have little doodles of an editor and a mediator, and they both can update and create entries. Mediators can merge, transform, and delete entries. And both roles can be associated with a permission at the collection level or the institution level or a country level. So you can be, typically you will be an editor for an institution.
Mari, can you hear me, Mari?
The different collection entries in GRSciColl for your institution. Or often we have mediators for GBIF nodes. For example, Victor is one of the mediators for Ecuador, and he's able to make updates for entries within Ecuador, so Ecuadorian institutions, but also will be able to review suggestions that come from people who have been using the system, and then we'll be able to apply in this program.
Marie?
Okay. In addition to that, in order to avoid having too much redundant work, we set up a system where we can have the information of GRSciColl maintained by an external source. So what we mean by that, and I'm going to show an example here, is that let's say that we have an institution and those two associated collections, so a herbarium and a Mohs collection for the Natural History Museum of Paris. And in this particular example, the information for the institution is maintained in the GBIF registry because they're also a registered publisher on GBIF. So any update on the publisher page will be triggering the update on the GRSciColl page.
Hi, Mari, can you hear us? Mari.
Hello?
Hola Mari, tienes que estar en en el canal de inglés, no en el de español, por eso no podíamos escucharte, estábamos escuchando tu audio en inglés, solo el audio en español. Por favor, tienes que cambiarte al canal de inglés.
Oh, okay.
Abajo de interpretación, donde está el símbolo como de un globito, de un mundo, dice interpretation. Ahí, por
Eh,
favor, si puedes cambiarte al canal en inglés, porque no, porque estamos escuchando tu voz y la voz del canal de español en el mismo, superpuestas. No sé si pudiste hacerlo.
is it better now?
¿Puedes hablar
Okay,
de nuevo?
okay. So let me share again.
Ok, gracias, Mari.
Yeah, of course. Let me just share again the screen. I'm sorry about that. I didn't realize I was on the wrong channel. And I couldn't hear because I actually muted the feedback to avoid having too much, yeah, noise. Is it better now? Can you tell me? Yeah, I can see.
Sí, Mari, se escucha perfecto. Muchas gracias.
Yeah. Okay, I can see the. My apologies for that. Yeah, I must use the English room, of course. And now I see all the messages I've been having, but didn't read. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. I hope that this wasn't too difficult to follow for everyone. And just interrupt me if I'm again in the wrong channel. All right. So I was trying to explain how, in addition to editors and mediators on GRSciColl and anyone being able to make changes, one way to maintain the information on the system is to link entries to external sources. And I presented two types of sources. So if you have a published dataset on GBIF, you can say this dataset corresponds to that collection, and the information will be automatically updated whenever the metadata of a dataset is updated. And if you have a registered publisher, you can also use that to link it to an institution, and the information will be automatically updated if the publisher page is updated. And in addition to that, we have also Index-A-Biorum as a source of information for either institutions or collections, or both. I won't go into detail, but if you're interested, I can answer questions later on. But know that if your institution or your collection is on Index-A-Biorum, it will also be in GRSciColl. So in practice, we have more than half of the records that are maintained in Index-A-Biorum, and a little bit less than half that are maintained directly in the registry, meaning with editors and people who make update directly in the registry interface. And we have a very, very small fraction that are actually maintained at the dataset level on GBIF. And in addition to that, I mentioned a few times that we have an API. This API can be used to retrieve information from GRSciColl, but it can also be used to update information on GRSciColl. And we've had the cases where we have country-level surveys that have been used to later update semi-automatically the information on GRSciColl. So, for example, we have a lot of British institutions that have been updated that way on GRSciColl because they had a national survey, and also CESP Colombia has been updated information on GRSciColl via the API. In addition to that, we have a team of 35 mediators who are responsible for 50 countries. A number of those mediators are actually GBIF regional contractors, and they take care of the African and Asian region. but a lot of the others, the other mediators are actually nodes or node staff members. So to give you an idea, about a bit more than 700 institutions and collections were edited this year. And I'm mentioning only the ones that aren't coming from Indexa-Biorum. Yeah. So one more thing that might be relevant for a lot of people is to note that if you publish your data on GBIF as occurrences, then these occurrences will be linked to GRSciColl pages whenever possible. And that will allow you to have metrics aggregated on your institution and collection pages. So far, we have about 100 million specimens that are linked to GRSciColl pages. And one interesting thing about it is that it's independent of the way you share your data on GBIF. So one big data set can be split into many collections, and the opposite way around, if you have records in various different data sets, they can all be aggregated on one collection or institution page on GRSciColl. So the way the occurrences are linked to GRSciColl is via the collection and institution codes and identifiers. So on GRSciColl, all the institution collections have at least one code, and occurrences that have collection and institution codes are automatically attempted to be linked to GRSciColl. So our system uses the same system that our lookup service does. The lookup service is an API product that anyone can use, but our system uses it also to link occurrences to GRSciColl. And so if you're interested in knowing how to make sure your occurrences are linked to GRSciColl, we actually have a blog that's linked here and explains exactly how you can proceed. Okay, so who is working with GRSciColl right now? Well, at GBIF, we have we maintain and we host it, and we try to develop it as much as we can. Indexa-Biorum is providing a lot of data via weekly synchronizations. IDIG-Bio has imported all of their collection information to GRSciColl, and the information is now maintained in GRSciColl, and IDIG-Bio retrieves it via the GRSciColl API. We're also working with the NCBI Bio Collection in order to import their identifiers so that people will know which entries on GRSciColl correspond to which entries on the NCBI Bio Collection website. And the most important partner is the community. That's you, that's everyone who's actually updating information on GRSciColl. And that's actually a lot of people, all the mediators, anyone making suggestions, which we have a lot of at that point. So thank you so much for listening. I apologize for the technical issue. Please let me know if you have any question.
Muchas gracias, Mary, por tu presentación. Excelente charla. Muchas gracias. Perdón que tengo aquí. Listo. Les recordamos a todos los participantes que pueden escribir sus preguntas en el chat, y estas serán respondidas al final de las dos presentaciones, luego del receso en una plenaria. Así también se dará también paso a que puedan también hacer las preguntas de forma verbal. Nuestra segunda charla del día de hoy se titula El nuevo Latimen Core para la descripción de colecciones científicas. Quiero invitar a Jutta Buschbaum. Jutta es investigadora y consultora en jefe de la empresa alemana Statistical Genetics. Así también es la coordinadora de este proyecto CESP. Jutta, por favor, si nos puedes ayudar con tu charla. Muchas gracias.
Okay, I hope you can see my screen. All right. I need to. Okay. Okay. I would like to pick up where Marie left off, and so Marie introduced you to GRSciColl, the GBIF Global Registry for Scientific Collections. And she provided you a more hands-on look at GRSciColl and to let you know how you can actually interact with it yourself. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of look under the hood of GRSciColl. For that, so what in the program, there were 2 talks and I combined them into one. So I'm going to give you a short outline how my talk is going to proceed. So I'm going to quickly go back to the digital extended specimen infrastructure, then introduce you to the Lattimore core standard. Going to consider minimum information that is needed for a collections registry, and then explore with you how the Lattimore core standard for describing collections can fit your work, your management of collections, as well as your research questions. So during the first session, I introduced you to the next generation of biodiversity data infrastructures. And so the digital extended specimen concept is the outcome of a global consultation held within last year. And it is a biodiversity data infrastructure that aims to be globally integrated and extensible. It has several core elements, and I'm going to highlight here 2 of them, which are of interest here. So it is very important that this new generation of infrastructures is going to be transactional. And the great thing is that as a module within GBIF, GRSciColl is actually a module that is already transactional because you can interact with it. As data providers, you can suggest records and update the records for your collections. So that's quite exciting that we have this functionality already. The other element that I wanted to highlight is the importance of metadata and data standards. The bigger your infrastructure is going to be, the wider its scope, the more it is important to harmonize data so it can be combined and merged to analyze it together and for combined reporting. So, and this is actually where the Lattimore core standard comes in. Before I continue with the standard, I wanted to point out the importance of data providers for the for powerful data infrastructures. So the DES requires reliable association of primary biodiversity records to their data providers, which is a matter of data quality. So as a data user, you need catalogs that present up-to-date information rich records about data providers. So you can actually contact them and inquire about data, provide annotations, and discuss provenance, and so all the important interactions that will result in data quality. So records of data providers will increase, on one hand, on the other hand also provide visibility to data providers by being able to act as entry points that provide more extensive summaries and metrics about the data resources that the data provider shares. They give access to or can give access to repositories of digitized specimens. They provide attribution and thus potentially support the flow of benefits back to data providers. And they strengthen the accountability of governments, funders, and data users. And this I mean in the most possible sense of accountability, because often it is actually quite hard for funders and governments to show all the efforts and initiatives that they support to improve the databases for biodiversity evaluations, and having a good informative repositories of data providers which might link to data sets is actually a really important element to show and being able to quantify biodiversity data. So this is where Latimer Core, the collection description standard, comes in. So Latimer Core is designed to support the representation, discovery, and communication of natural science collections. It structures data about the groups of objects, so about collections, that those collections and their subcomponents encompass. And the creation of collection level records is intended to promote visibility and the use of items in collections. The development of the standard has actually taken quite a while. So it started in 2004, so 18 years ago, and one could consider this whole process something like a dinosaur. But unlike dinosaurs, it didn't went extinct, and currently the standard has entered the first phase of review and is going towards adoption. So, so we're very happy about that. The name derives from the two coelacanth fish species called Latimeria, which are by many considered to be living fossils, still going strong. And they were discovered by a young fish curator from East London in South Africa, who discovered the first of the fishes in a catch of a fishing boat in 1938. And her name was Marjorie Courtenay Latimer. So, and it was important for us as a group to name the standard after a woman from the Global South. So, if you would like to know some more information about the standard, there are two links on the slide that you can follow. So a standard never exists in a vacuum. It is always surrounded by other standards. And to give you an idea of how the Latimer Core fits into the landscape of data and their standards. So the scope of Latimer Core lies between the organization ontology standard, which provides a structure to describe institutions and their hierarchies. On the other side, there are single specimens which are grouped within collections. So, and Darwin Core is the standard that allows you to describe primary biodiversity records, so single specimens. So the Latimer core doesn't want to reinvent the wheel, so it recycles and reuses terms directly from other standards, or less formally aligns its terms with the terms of other standards. This has the advantage that the data that it describes will be easily integrated with other data types that are described by other standards. So high-level design principles of the standard are that it aims to be flexible and scalable. So the goal is that it can describe the overall collection holdings of an institution. Here is the entryway of the National Museum in Buenos Aires. And on the other hand, the contents in a single drawer, which might be just a couple of specimens. It can do so it can be usable for this wide range of scopes because it is built modularly. So it employs generic classes that can be attached to themselves and to other classes. It provides provides flexible relationships between the classes, and it allows developers and data providers to specify rules that classes and properties should adhere to. Okay, so these are actually the contents of the standard. It's 23 classes. At the heart of the classes is the class called the object group. So this is a group of objects, a collection that share some property, so that you want to group. And so this object group class describes the core properties. Yeah.
Jutta, please, we lost the translation. Can you wait a bit?
Okay.
Just for don't
I can
lose.
do so.
Thank you. Marcelo
Thanks
is
for letting
saying that.
me know.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Thank you, Jutta.
Okay, just let me know when I can continue. I can't hear it.
I'll let you know. Para todos, hemos perdido contacto con la traductora simultánea de inglés a español. Así que en breve seguiremos con la charla de Jutta.
Yes. Okay, great, perfect. So, yes, so at the heart of the standard is the object group, and so it provides information about core properties of a group of objects, a collection, and surrounding it are other classes that provide information on more specific dimension or aspects of the object group. So, and these classes can be grouped into 5 categories, roughly. So on the left in green are classes that focus on the characteristics of the objects within the collection. Then in purple at the bottom, there are classes that are providing information of use for custodianship of collection. On the top in light blue are classes for building data structures and links. And on the right is a red class for defining metrics, narratives, and summaries. And then finally, at the right in dark blue are 8 classes that are generic, and they provide necessary information for data sharing. There are only 3 classes that are mandatory, and these are, so that's given by the standard, and these are the object group itself, and then 2 light blue classes, the record level class and the collection description scheme class. So when looking inside the object group class, so it provides core information about the collection, and its properties can be categorized like into 3 categories. There's first the information about the group as a whole, so the group's name, for example, or the conditions of access to the whole collection. And then there's another category with information about the contents of the group, so the objects and specimens. Many of the properties in here describe the material type of the specimen. And finally, then there are there's actually quite a few properties that start with has, so like has identifier, has taxon. And these are these provide links to more complex properties that cannot be described by a single value, so they require several values. As for example, the identifier class. So you can attach an identifier class to the object group, and within it you define the type of the identifier and its value. Or you can, very likely your collection will contain specimens of different taxa. So you can attach for each taxon that is represented in your collection, you can attach a taxon class to the object group, which then provides information of the taxon rank and the scientific name that is present in the collection. So you can repeat classes. The second required class is the one, the collection description scheme. And that is a very interesting concept, I find. It allows you to define profiles for your collections. So perspectives on your collections along a certain dimension that are formalized, that are written down, and so they are reusable and they can be shared among collections. So everybody calculates the same metrics, and so the data can be combined. What you need is, you need a scheme term to set the required properties and dimensions that you're looking at for a specific scheme. And then you can, not only group sub-collections, but you also can calculate metrics of interest. And on the right, for example, is such a scheme that would fit a collections registry very well. It's a bit a lot to explain, but please go to the wiki and there's a good description of it. Yeah, so this is what I wanted to talk about with regard to the standard, give you a first impression of it. If I could interest you in the standard, and if you would like to know more, there are actually 2 very good resources. One is the Latimer Core browser, which provides a very visual platform for exploring the standards classes and their properties, and as well as the relationships that are allowed between them. Here at the bottom. And the other resource is the Latimer Core Wiki on GitHub, which provides an overview and introduction, guidelines of how to use the different classes, and also the start of tutorials. And yeah, more background information always can be found on the TADWEC Collections Descriptions Interest Group webpage. So now I would like to move towards global registry and GRSciColl, and see how can the standard be used for a registry. So what can it contribute to this use case? And what part of the standard, so what classes are needed to provide a minimum set for that makes sense and that provides sufficient information for a global registry. So if you look at the classes that are needed for a registry, so there's on one hand, there's the mandatory classes, the object group, record level, and collection description scheme. And then specifically for registry, you need a couple of more classes, which is one hand, I don't think it's visible very well, but with a gray circle. So there's the organizational unit class, and then there are several of the dark blue classes that provide information on data sharing. So look, exploring the relationship of what is already present in GRSciColl here at the top, the proposed minimum set of classes for a global registry, and then how that corresponds to the principles for open data and open knowledge systems, specifically the FAIR principles and the CARE principles. So the FAIR principles are the 4 principles of findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So these are technical principles that allow data to be open and reused. The CARE principles add a ethical, social, and legal dimension. And so they provide principles for collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics. So what we want for a registry is that all the factors within these principles are covered by the standard and the registry. So first we need to look at the relationship between GRSciColl, the functionality that it provides, and the standard. So GRSciColl basically has 2 main entry forms, one for the institution and one for the collections. And here in green, and in between is kind of like the registry's back end that we normally don't see. And as you can see, there are many connections between the GRSciColl entry forms and the proposed class of minimum, the proposed minimum set of classes from the standard. So everything seems to be covered on that side. And then going from the minimum set of classes to the principles, you also can see that all of the principles are covered by the classes. So the classes provide information to fulfill these principles. There's one class that is a little bit of an exception, and that is a dark gray class, kind of to the write for conditions, which is actually not the class of Latimer core. It would be one that would be attached from a different standard, and it's about ethical, legal, and social conditions that apply to a GRSciColl record and its data. So that is information about the conditions for sharing that is also currently not directly covered by GRSciColl. Yes, so since GRSciColl is working very well, we don't expect any fundamental changes, and we're happy to find out that the standard is covering all the needs. So what about you as data provider? How does it look for you when you went to enter the information about your institution? What into GRSciColl or a global registry, what is a minimum set of information that you need to enter? And so actually for each institutional collection, what you need to enter are you need to fill in both forms, one for the institution, which provides administrative information, and one for the collections, the holdings of the institution, so the collection itself. And this is an example for the Museo Argentino de Ciencias Naturales Bernardino Rivadavia in Buenos Aires. So on the top you have the institution itself, the overall institution, the museum, and its 6 research areas. And within each research areas there are divisions, which then the collections here in gray are attached to these divisions. And I only filled in the structure for 2 of them because it would become too complicated. So what you need is for minimum information about about the collections that you would like to add to GRSciColl is you need to enter the overall institution and then the overall collection holdings of that institution. And later on, you can fill in everything else. And Latimer core actually should make it easier to provide these hierarchical structures more intuitive and easier. So so with that, I would like to enter the last part of the talk and explore how you can make the standard work for you for your collection and your research needs. So apart from this minimum set of information that you need to be able to share your collection record with the registry and the world, what you can do is you can expand on the information that describe your collections. So you can add the green classes and with describing characteristics of the objects in your collection, the purple classes with custodial information, add the red measurement of facts, metrics and summaries, and build the light blue schemata for overview across collections. So the standard and especially as schematas allow you to not only look within your collection, look at your collection from different perspectives along different dimensions and properties, but also across collections using the same dimensions and properties. So allowing you to produce metrics for disaggregation along these different dimensions that then can be visualized in dashboards. And GBIF has already started to build a set of dashboards that allows you to represent your data. And here presented on the right is an example from the synthesis project depicting European collections, the holdings of European collections. So this is kind of very exciting to see all of this. And how, so this is kind of high level, so how would this actually work? These different dimensions that you would apply to collections. So imagine you have here on the top left, you have one object group that contains 650 objects and has a dimension for geographic origin, so from Ethiopia and Tanzania, and one for taxon. So it contains mammals and reptiles. So it gives you a summary of the collection, but what you actually really want is you want to obtain a much more fine-grained insights into the collection or your collections by calculating summaries at the intersection of these multiple dimensions, these two dimensions. And that is what at the lower right, the graph shows you. So you define sub-collections at the intersections of these dimensions and just use these to describe your collection much more fine-grained. So to sum up, Latimer Core aims to be a guide and inspiration that is of benefit to you and your work. And it's not the other way around. You don't exist for the standard, but the standard really wants to help you to describe your collections and allow it to be interoperable with the descriptions by others of their collections. Using the standard is completely independent of your technical environment. So you're free to choose the technical tools and workflows of your choice. So it doesn't matter if you use the graphical interface of GRSciColl and use the functionality provided by GBIF, if you use a relational database system, if you code everything, serialize it in JSON-LD, or if you use a spreadsheet software to record all of your data, for example, Excel. Well, our interest is that when you describe your collections, that this information finds its way into GRSciColl, and by adding your information to GRSciColl, it becomes more information rich and becomes a wider coverage. And the goal is that it becomes the global registry and go-to resource for biodiversity data providers. So I very much would like to thank my fellow members in the Tadwig Latimer Core Task Group and my project partners in the GBIF project, as well as Marie and Andrea Hahn from the GRSciColl team. Yes, thank you very much for your interest. And I believe we are going straight into the break. And Victor, you're taking over again.
Muchas gracias, Yuta, por tu charla. Luego esta serie de... Muchas gracias por tu charla. Antes de ir a una pausa de 10 minutos, les invitamos a participar en una breve encuesta. No sé, Yuta, si nos ayudas, por favor, con el Menti, para podernos conocer un poco más. Una vez que pasemos el Menti, tendremos un pequeño receso de 10 minutos y luego regresaremos para la plenaria. Así que, por favor, vayan alistando sus
Gracias,
preguntas.
Yuta. Por favor, quien lo haya muteado a Víctor, puede desmutearlo, así podemos continuar. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Anabela, Yuta. Por favor, si podemos ingresar a menti.com y utilizar el código que está ahí. El código es 65790053. Si nos ayudan contestando esas preguntas. Ujú. Listo, ya están comenzando a responder. Muchas gracias. Por favor, si nos ayudan respondiendo a la pequeña encuesta. Listo, muchas gracias a los que están contestando. Yuta, eran una o dos. No sé si hay otra pregunta. Tal vez podemos seguir pasando para ir al receso. Que nos fácilmente queda abierto y nos vemos en 10 minutos entonces para la plenaria. Y durante el receso, por favor, pueden seguir completando las personas que todavía no han llenado la encuesta. Así también, por favor, los que deseen, hay un enlace a Google Forms para que se puedan registrar. Y los que ya se han registrado en las charlas anteriores, no es necesario que se vuelvan a registrar nuevamente. Muchas gracias. Nos vemos en 10 minutos. Perdón, he estado muteado. Muchas gracias. Luego de esta serie de presentaciones del día de hoy, les invitamos a una sesión de trabajo. Vamos a contestar las preguntas hechas en el chat y también les animamos a levantar la mano en caso que de que quieran encender su micrófono para hacer alguna pregunta adicional. Hasta el momento solamente hay una pregunta en el chat, que es si los campos de Latimer solo están disponibles en inglés, al igual que en GRSciColl. Veo que Mari ya ha respondido en el chat, sin embargo, tal vez si quieres ampliar un poco la respuesta, Mari. ¿Algo se me escuchaba o no la última vez que hablé?
Te escuchamos muy bien, Víctor.
Creo que Mari, no, Mari sí se puede desmutear, Mari.
Hello. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. I heard until Marie partially responded and then not the rest. But I assume the question.
No. Sí, no, lo que digo es que hay una pregunta en el chat que tú ya la has respondido en el chat. Sin embargo, si tal vez quieres ampliar un poco más para que las personas que no están pendientes del chat puedan también escuchar. La pregunta que hizo el colega fue si los campos en Latimer Core solo están en inglés, al igual que en GRSciColl. Respondiste ya en el chat, sí, pero no toda la gente está pendiente del chat, entonces tal vez si también la quieres responder para que las demás personas escuchen, por favor. O si quieres ampliar también la pregunta, la respuesta.
Yeah. Okay. So for Latimer Core, I don't know. But for GRSciColl, the fields have been translated by Soledad actually, as well as their description, and it is at the moment it is in our test system. It is not available yet to everyone in the production system, but we're working on it. And I hope that soon you'll be able to read the field and the field descriptions in Spanish for GRSciColl. For Latimer Core, maybe Yuta can answer. I don't know, actually.
That's actually a good question. No, so currently the standard is only in English, but certainly it will make sense to translate it into different languages. So, for example, into Spanish. Yeah, so thank you for pointing that out. I will forward that and mention that during our next group meeting.
Muchas gracias, Mari y Yuta. También les recordamos de que si es que alguien no ha llenado el formulario de Google Forms, luego también será remitido para que puedan completarlo posteriormente. No sé si es que alguien tal vez desea hacer alguna otra pregunta, puede levantar la mano sin ningún problema para darle la palabra. O también pueden escribirla en el chat. Sí, están preguntando si el formulario es el mismo que para la semana pasada. Si el formulario es el mismo, es prácticamente para las personas que no se han registrado anteriormente. Igual también, como les comentamos, ya los 2 videos de las charlas anteriores están disponibles ya en el canal de YouTube de Spinach, así que pueden verlo. Ahí las personas que también por algún motivo no pudieron asistir a las charlas anteriores. Asimismo, esta charla también será subida posteriormente a YouTube. El formulario es el mismo. El formulario es el mismo, así que si solamente es para las personas que no se han registrado anteriormente. No sé si es que alguien más tiene alguna pregunta, por favor puede levantar la mano. Sí, José, ya te doy la palabra. A ver, solicitar para activar. Gracias. José.
Buenas tardes, ¿qué tal? Una consulta. No tengo muy claro la diferencia entre el Latimer Core y el Darwin Core. Una consulta, por ejemplo, si tengo un grupo de datos y los he subido al formato Darwin Core, ¿también ¿Se aplica lo mismo en el mismo grupo de datos este formato Latimer Core que han explicado? Esto no me queda muy claro, por favor.
No sé si Annie puede responder, Mari, perdón, puede responder la pregunta. O Yuta, no sé, alguien cualquiera de las dos. Gracias.
So do I understand correctly? So you asked about Latimer core versus Darwin core. Is that the question? Did I get it right? Because yes, okay, good, thank you. So
Ahora están haciendo algunas preguntas. Uno le pregunta que la diferencia entre Darwin Core y el Latam Core, o sea, que
So it's like, what's the difference between
yes, all
Latin?
right. So Darwin core is for sharing data at various level of information, and it's very commonly used for occurrences. So it's the collection of a specimen at a given time and a given place. While Latimer core, and Yuta can correct me if I'm wrong, it's information about a collection. So it's not at the specimen level, it's for a higher abstraction level. So it's about the collection and a number of characteristics associated with that collection, but not necessarily go into detail. And Darwin core is more generic. It's often used for specimen level description of data, but also for taxon, also for events, collection events, this type of data. So it really is at another level of abstraction. I hope I could answer your question, but let me know if this is unclear.
Muchas gracias, Mari. Entonces, para recapitular, Darwin Core es para registrar ocurrencias o eventos como tal, y el Latimer Core es más para registrar colecciones. Igual, José, puedes hacer otra pregunta de seguimiento si gustas en el chat. Tenemos otra pregunta, y esta sí es, creo que sería también, si puedes compartir pantalla, también sería increíble, Mari. Dice, si como institución ya hemos subido varios datos en GBIF, estos datos, hemos subido a GBIF varios datos de diferentes colecciones. ¿Cómo pueden estos datos registrarse en GRSciColl? ¿Cómo haríamos la solicitud? Tal vez puedes incluso compartirnos la pantalla, explicarles a la gente cómo hacer, Mari. Bueno, si es que hay tiempo también, porque veo que estamos.
Yes, thank you, Victor. That's a very good question, and I will share my screen. It would be even better if you actually can tell me which collection you already shared on GBIF. But I'll go on our test system and show you otherwise. So let me just share my screen. So I'm gonna go to, so this is our test system. This is not the actual final GRSciColl. It looks like GRSciColl editing interface, but with a few tweaks. And you can actually see here that you even have the Spanish translation available, which isn't the case in the current system. So this is the test system. This is where we develop new features and where there is a number of test data available. So this is the editing interface for GRSciColl. This is where you would make suggestions, for example. So I'm going to log in to make the little short demonstration. But let's say that you have a data set on GBIF that's been published. And once again, I'm going to go to our test system so that I can just showcase quickly. But let's say you have a data set on GBIF that has been published, and I'm going to take a random one. So let's imagine this is the data set that you published on GBIF, and you would like the metadata to be turned into a collection entry on GRSciColl. So you can go and you can create, and then you can say that you want this data set to be made into a GRSciColl entry. So I don't know if I can show you that properly, but you can say that this data set is the one you want, and you want it to be associated with the code. This is just a made-up code, right? And then you can create it, and then you will have an entry on GRSciColl, and it will have a GRSciColl page, and you can put your data like that. And if you have aggregated, if you have occurrences, then they will be aggregated here on this page. If you're interested about how to make sure your occurrences are aggregated to your GRSciColl entries, we can talk about that. But this is just a short demo on how from a GBIF dataset you can create a GRSciColl entry with a few clicks. If you're interested, you can contact me. I can give you the permissions you need, or you can contact, depending on the country you're in, you can also get in touch with your node manager, and hopefully they'll be able to help. I see that there are things written in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Let me know if this is clear enough, and if not, I'm happy to also send documentation or have another shot at it.
Muchas gracias, Mari, por la respuesta. Creo que quedó claro. Igual yo les he colocado en el chat ahora el enlace, el enlace a la página web donde ustedes pueden sugerir cambios o crear nuevas colecciones o instituciones. Es registry.gbif.org. Las personas de Ecuador pueden escribir también a mí sin ningún problema para ayudarles en el caso. Igual las personas de Colombia, de Argentina, perdón, Anabela, y los de Guatemala a Melissa. Y podemos ayudarles en caso que tengan alguna duda con respecto al llenado, o si no directamente con Mari también. Adicionalmente también hemos creado un foro, un hilo en el foro de GBIF, para que se pueda también tener discusión sobre la serie de webinars. Entonces pueden también ingresar, registrarse al foro en caso que tengan preguntas o inquietudes adicionales. En este momento está el enlace al foro en línea en el chat. No sé si hay alguna otra pregunta, por favor. Revisando el chat, igual si no tengo nada por aquí, no sé si alguien más desea tomar la palabra. Puede levantar la mano sin ningún problema. Parece que no tenemos preguntas adicionales. A ver, aquí tenemos otra pregunta en el chat, déjenlas leer. Dicen, Mari, ¿qué estándares recomiendas utilizar para que la información de las colecciones sea lo más completa, confiable y accesible? En mi caso utilizo Darwin Core, pero veo que también existen otros, como en este caso el Latimer Core.
My answer to that is whichever whichever format is the easiest for you to use, because the most important is that you're able to maintain the information easily. So what we want is just to have information and that it's maintained. If this is easier for you to use Dublin Core or Darwin Core, please use that. Darwin Core, Latimer Core is also a good one, but the idea is to maintain the information, and so I would say use what you feel most confident using, and use it to update information as often as you can. I hope that makes sense. But otherwise, for information about collection, I think Latimer Core is quite extensive. It is just not supported yet by GRSciColl, but it is in our program for this 2023 work, so it will be there. So if you do the work, it won't be wasted. Just so you know, it might not be there right now. So to reiterate, make sure that you use what you can to maintain the information as often as possible. That's the most important. And then, of course, you can go in more details with Latimer Core. But in that case, just know that it will be a little bit of time before it's compatible with GRSciColl.
Yeah, if I maybe
Muchas
can
gracias,
add
Mari, por tu respuesta.
to
Anabela
this.
tenía la mano levantada. Por favor, Anabela.
Gracias, Víctor. No, solo quería hacer un breve paréntesis porque me parece que hay una serie de confusiones. Dentro de GBIF convive un montón de información, de colecciones, de instituciones, de taxonomía, de georreferencias. Hay muchísima información. Y para poderla compartir es que usamos estándares. Razón por la cual, para compartir los datos de biodiversidad, ya sea ocurrencias, listas de especies o datos de monitoreo, usamos Darwin Core, que es un estándar para datos y metadatos. Entonces, ahí sí ponemos información de las colecciones, ponemos el acrónimo, ponemos el nombre de la institución y todas esas cuestiones. Pero el centro ahí son los datos. También tenemos estándares que se sugieren para el uso de imágenes o videos, como es Audubon Core. También, si nos enfocamos, si salimos un poquito de la colección en sí, o sea, de los ejemplares, tenemos códigos para las instituciones y las colecciones. Y ahí entra Latimer y entra el sistema de GRSciColl, que son cosas que se parecen, pero no son iguales. La idea acá es que ustedes puedan compartir la información en la mayor cantidad de estándares posible, de la forma más estandarizada posible, de la misma forma que se les pide muchas veces a los colectores, a los identificadores, si tienen un número de ORCID para agregar, porque eso nos ayuda a desambiguar y sabemos quién es quién. Porque hoy, por ejemplo, estoy mirando acá, Carolina Madero, sabemos quién es Carolina Madero, pero de acá a 50 años es posible que esa información no esté y teniendo un identificador único lo vamos a poder hacer. Así que recuerden, dentro de GBIF conviven cantidad de información, colecciones, instituciones, personas, georreferencias, taxones, y, autoridades taxonómicas, así que depende qué es lo que están mirando, es como qué idioma deberían hablar, o sea, qué estándar deberían completar. Pero la sugerencia de María es sumamente valiosa, siempre completar lo más que se pueda. Espero haber aclarado un poquito. Gracias.
Muchas gracias, Anabela. Creo que sí quedó un poco más claro para todos. Yuta, por favor.
Yeah, so it's really two different levels, the standards, and it really depends on what your focus is. So in an ideal world where all the specimens and all the data is digitized, or if you're only focusing on digitally born occurrence records, all information is associated with your collection, your physical specimen. But at this point, we are not there yet. So many collections have a wealth of specimens and information that is not digitized. And nevertheless, it is important to show that the collections exist. And yeah, provide a rough idea of what the collections contain. And this is where Latimer Core comes in. So it allows you to describe collections, so your collections or groups of objects at a higher level, so as using a summary. So, and even if the collection is not digitized yet. So say you have 10,000 physical specimens in your collection, but you only have 2,000 digitized, then still Latimer Core and GRSciColl will allow you to provide information that you have actually 10,000 specimens for these and these taxa. So Latimer Core, like taking a collections point of view, is about providing an overview over collections. And providing a way to calculate metrics. So how many taxa do you have in your collection? How many individual specimens do you have per taxon? Where are they from? These kind of metrics and summaries. So to giving an overview. In the future, it would be really nice to aggregate everything up from the digitized specimen. So a collection level standard might not be so necessary when everything is digitized and we have all the information at hand, and then we can just aggregate the information about where the specimens are stored from the specimen level up to the collection level and the institutional level, but we are not there yet. And this gap is filled by Latimer Core. Yes.
Muchas gracias, Yuta. Tenemos otra pregunta desde parte de Randall en el chat. Dice Randall de que si es que ya tenemos estándares comunitarios por un grupo de colecciones, como por ejemplo el índice del variorum, ¿estos nombres están ya siendo integrados en el sistema de Latimer Core o es un trabajo que tiene que ser hecho aún? No sé quién puede responder, no sé si Yuta o Mari pueden responder.
I can try to, oh, sorry, Yuta, go ahead. I was going to say that I think that this question may be more about the content of the information, meaning institutions and collections. So this is not necessarily about the standard, I imagine. I don't know if I understand correctly, but so information from Index Abarum is available in GRSciColl. I don't think we have anything from ASIH fish names, but that could be a potential source of information that could also be integrated in Index Abarum. But that's independent of the Latimer Core standard. That's about the content, like which institutions and collections are mentioned in the registry, not necessarily about how it is packaged or formatted or standardized, unless I misunderstood the question. But Yuta, if you want to add anything.
So yes, there are already registries for collections like Index Herbariorum, but they're specific for specific taxon groups. Yeah, Index Herbariorum, as the name says, is for plants. And so for plant collections, there are certain aspects that are of importance, and then there are other aspects that are not important at all. So Index Herbariorum, while it is perfect for plants, might not work for a different group of animals, fungi, microorganisms. So what Latimer Core tries to do is to have a system, a structure that is as general as possible. So all kinds of different collections can be integrated into each other. And so Index Herbariorum would be one of these systems that that Latimer Core is able to represent, but it then can do more. It can also represent other types of collections. So that's why we have a general standard.
Muchas gracias. No sé si es que Randall, bueno, Randall dice que muchas gracias, entonces te entiendo que la pregunta está respondida. Bueno, esta es una excelente pregunta, también es muy interesante, dice Liliana. ¿Qué pasa si es que alguien proporciona datos de una colección incorrectos y están en GRSciColl? ¿Hay alguien que revisa, valida y corrige estos datos?
So I can answer that. If the data has already been provided in GRSciColl and has been incorrect, it's quite difficult for us to find. So unless someone points it to us or is keen on reviewing a specific set of collections that they know, then it's difficult for us to correct those mistakes. That being said, all the new update suggestions are reviewed before approval, and they're reviewed either by us at the Secretariat, or if there is a node that has volunteered to review the institutions in their countries, then we forward them the suggestions and they can review the suggestions. So for example, if someone is trying to suggest an update for an Ecuadorian collection, I will send it to Nestor and Victor, and they will review it. And if they have further questions, they will contact the person who made the suggestion, and then they will approve or discard the suggestion. So this is how the suggestion system works right now. So the new updates, the new suggestions are reviewed, but if there are any mistakes from the past, before we had the suggestion system, they might not be easily findable for us. So it's very important that you check your records. It's what I want to say. Check your records to make sure there is no mistakes there.
Muchas gracias, Mar. Y los colegas que tengan colecciones pueden entrar al enlace que les dejamos en la página, en el chat de registry.gbif.org. Pueden buscar por el código de colección, por el nombre de la colección o la institución, y en base a eso pueden tal vez ver si ya existe, porque muchas veces ya han sido creados por terceras personas la información que está desactualizada, y pueden sugerir cambios o también pueden sugerir desde ya la creación de su colección o su institución. Entonces eso cualquier persona puede editar, puede sugerir cambios o puede sugerir creaciones, así que es completamente disponible para ustedes. Hay una mano levantada, que dejen ver de quién es la mano, que no veo. Es de Anabela, sí, Anabela.
Gracias, Víctor. Para que se den una idea, si su institución se ha adherido a GBIF, o sea que tiene su perfil de institución, ya figura, hay algún registro en GRSciColl. Si ustedes publicaron datos, también. Y también está toda la cuestión de los herbarios, toda la información del Index Herbariorum ya está. Lo que sí puede pasar, si todavía no hubo un periodo de curación de esos datos, es que el herbario figure aparte de la institución que lo contiene. Pero la idea siempre es, si el país tiene nodo, bueno, comunicarse con el nodo para ver lo que está, lo que falta, y de hecho es muy seguro que bueno, las instituciones de Ecuador, de Guatemala y de Argentina reciban un email de nuestra parte diciendo: hola, estamos actualizando todo esto, necesitamos saber si todo esto está bien. Pero va a haber una validación. Los países que no tienen un nodo de GBIF van a tener otro nivel de validación, pero para, como les decía, Ecuador, Guatemala y Argentina, para hacerlo breve en esta reunión, van a recibir un email de los node manager que estamos acá, o sea, de Néstor o de Víctor, de Melissa o mío.
Muchas gracias, Anabela. No sé si tenemos alguna otra pregunta, alguna duda, comentario. Sí. Otra cosa también, James también justo acaba de colocar un enlace que es muy interesante, el de bionomía. Este es para poder hacer seguimiento a los colectores y a los identificadores de las colecciones. Entonces, si no hay más preguntas o comentarios por parte del equipo del proyecto, queremos agradecerles a todas y todos por su atención esta tarde, noche y mañana, dependiendo en qué usuario estén. Y esperamos también tenerlos para nuestro siguiente y último webinar de esta primera serie de webinars el próximo lunes, igual a la misma hora. Una excelente tarde para todas y todos y un gusto haberlos visto el día de hoy.